Welcome everyone. This is the account with a report for day 430 of the war in Ukraine. Thank you for joining me. Today I have an anniversary to mention. I also have one extra segment regarding a drone attack and resulting large fire in Sevastopol, Crimea. Additionally, I want to share an interview by President Zelensky. All other updates are grouped into the usual: situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. Before we start the news though, the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. The situation is the same as has been for a while. Russia is slowly advancing inside Bakhmut while Ukrainian forces mount a stiff resistance. It is possible that Russia managed to capture the medical college in Bakhmut during the day. Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the Wagner PMC, threatened to abandon positions next to Bakhmut in Donetsk Oblast if his mercenaries do not get more supplies from the Kremlin. Avdiivka. Russia reportedly managed to make small gains inside Permovaiske during the day. All other assaults around Avdiivka were repelled. Especially around Nevelske, rather large losses of mechanized equipment were reported. And now a quick look at today's anniversary. Today is the 105th anniversary of the Navy flag of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In 1918, the Black Sea Fleet was officially declared the Ukrainian People's Republic Fleet, and red flags flying on the ships were exchanged with Ukrainian flags. To mark the event, flags were raised in Kyiv as a symbol of Ukraine's belief in victory and the return of the Ukrainian Navy to Crimea. And to start the news segment, the updates on the latest attack on Sevastopol. Footage of a massive fire in the harbor of Sevastopol, Crimea, was shared on social media today. The footage shows dramatic scenes and massive smoke plumes over the city. Mikhail Razvozhayev, the Kremlin-appointed governor of Sevastopol, reported that a fuel storage tank was burning in Kozacha Bay, which he said was caused by a drone strike on the night of April 29th. Later, the statement clarified that 4 oil tanks were engulfed by the fire, which covered an area of 2,000 square meters. No one was reportedly injured, and more than 150 people and 50 pieces of equipment worked at the scene. The Kremlin-appointed head of the Republic of Crimea, Sergei Aksionov, reported that simultaneously with the Sevastopol attack, 2 drones were shot down over Crimea. Olga Kovitidi, a so-called senator from Crimea, called for appropriate and tough decisions and actions, including the neutralization of Odessa. All oil storage facilities in Odessa must be destroyed. A strategic decision to neutralize Odessa as a Ukrainian military base must be made, she said. According to the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, as a result of the explosion in temporarily occupied Crimea Sevastopol, 10 oil tanks with a total capacity of 40,000 tons were destroyed. The fuel was intended for the Russian fleet. The explosion is described as God's punishment, in particular for the killed civilians in Uman, among whom there are 5 children. This punishment will be long-lasting. All residents of the temporarily occupied Crimea should avoid being near military facilities and facilities providing the aggressor's army in the near future, the statement reads. And now for President Zelensky's interview with representatives of Finnish, Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian media. The main takeaways of the interview are: the president is trying to use a few hours at night or early in the morning to read literature to switch from the war unleashed by Russia and maintain sanity. Ukraine has been preparing for a counteroffensive, however, it requires weapons to preserve more lives. Also, excess information that sometimes appears in the mass media is one of the reasons for delaying Ukraine's counteroffensive. President Zelensky is confident that Ukraine cannot delay the campaign to liberate its territories until partners provide F-16 fighter jets, so the counteroffensive should begin earlier. During Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, there were moments when certain countries promised assistance to Ukraine and failed to provide it on time. Russian troops have changed their warfare tactics to defend the temporarily occupied territories. A Finnish and Korean scenario of ending the war is unacceptable for Ukraine, as Russia, with its efforts and ambitions, would target the next country after Ukraine, and that cannot be allowed. A look at all the minor updates out of Ukraine. Regarding the aftermath of the missile attack on Uman, destroying at least 27 apartments in an apartment block. Another child was identified among the dead. The casualties are now reported as 23 dead, including 5 children, and 18 wounded. One woman is still listed as missing. Rescue operations are ongoing. Additionally, this morning a fire broke out in the destroyed apartment block. The search and rescue operation at the site of the Russian missile strike on a multi-story building in Uman has been completed. Ihor Klimenko, Ukraine's Minister of Internal Affairs, reported the casualties as 23 people were killed in the attack, including 6 children, and 9 people were injured. 17 people were rescued from under the rubble. Another 2 women are reported missing. He also shared this video of the aftermath of the strike. Russian state TV channel Russia 1 used footage of the destroyed apartment block in Uman during a segment about an alleged shelling of the occupied Donbas by Ukrainian armed forces. According to Alexander Prokudin, head of the Kherson Oblast military administration, authorities have started preparation for mass evacuation of residents of Kherson Oblast in case of a major Russian attack. Serhiy Lysak, head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration, reported that his administration is discussing the issue of reconstruction of the region with Czech President Petr Pavel, who visited the region today. Pavel also met internally displaced Ukrainians in Dnipro, tweeting that the region houses 200,000 people who lost their homes to the war. The Security Service of Ukraine has exposed and detained 6 more collaborators involved in organizing sham referendums in the temporarily occupied territories of Kherson and Luhansk Oblasts. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. President Volodymyr Zelensky has shared this video showing the destruction of the city of Mariupol. Mariupol. Almost 500,000 people once lived there, and now there are almost no intact houses left. The terrorist state did everything to kill this city. Over 90% of Mariupol is destroyed, Zelensky wrote. The video has been created by the United 24 team and shows a comparison of the satellite images of Mariupol in 2023 and 2021 by Maxa Technologies. As mentioned in a previous report, Google Maps has also updated its satellite imagery for Ukraine, showing the destruction caused by the Russian invasion. Russia is planning to forcibly relocate children from the Russian-occupied city of Horlivka, located near the city of Donetsk, occupied by Russia since 2014, the Ukrainian military's National Resistance Center reported. As stated by chairman of the Mejlis of the Crimean Tatar people, Refat Chubarov, military equipment in occupied Crimea has started to disappear. He suggested that Russia has begun to redeploy the equipment to defensive lines on the approaches to Crimea. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Russia currently has 14 warships on combat duty in the Black Sea, 2 of which are missile carriers with a total salvo of up to 16 cruise missiles. Deputy Chairman of the Security Council of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, has called for the total destruction of personnel and military equipment of Ukraine, the overthrow of the government in Kyiv, and acts of retribution against key figures of the government. I'm sorry for this rare display of biased opinion, but Medvedev's post on Telegram starts with, "The Kyiv dog continues to bark. Saliva flows down the hairy muzzle so that the owner see his fighting qualities." This should give you an idea what mental state he is in. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. Germany has offered to produce 250,000 155mm artillery shells for the Ukrainian army, which is a quarter of the total amount of ammunition that the EU intends to produce for Ukraine. Pakistan is preparing to provide Ukraine with Ansar Mark II man-portable air defense systems of its own production. According to the report, Pakistan's air defense equipment will be delivered through Poland. US President Joe Biden's fellow party members are pressuring him to make a decision on sending F-16 fighters and long-range missiles to Ukraine. The Hill names the leading figures in the Democratic Party who are putting the most pressure on Biden. These are Jason Crow, Richard Blumenthal, Sheldon Whitehouse, Jared Golden, and Mark Kelly. Members of Congress from the Democratic and Republican parties have both called on Biden to supply Ukraine with long-range ATACMS rocket artillery and modern F-16 fighters. An undisclosed report, seen by the New York Times, found faults in Amnesty International's August 4, 2022 statement accusing Ukrainian troops of illegally putting civilians in harm's way while fighting Russia. According to the newspaper, Amnesty's board has not yet reacted to the report completed months ago. Polish authorities have seized a high school building near the Russian embassy in Warsaw, expelling the Russian teaching staff. The school was intended for children of Russian diplomats, and the Russian envoy described the seizure as illegal. The eviction follows a court order as the building belongs to Warsaw City Hall. Russia has promised a harsh response for the move. It describes as a hostile act in violation of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations and as an encroachment against Russian diplomatic property in Poland. In response to the eviction, the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev, stated that it makes no sense for Russia to maintain diplomatic relations with Poland while Russophobes are in power in this country. Finbar Kafarki from Akyl Island in Komeo is reported to have been killed while serving as a military volunteer in the eastern part of Ukraine. In the wake of his death, Irish Deputy Premier Michael Martin expressed his sympathies to his family and said Mr. Kafarki was obviously a young man of clear principles. Ireland's Russian embassy has warned of possible ensuing consequences in response to tributes paid to Kafarki. The comments have been criticized by a former Minister for Justice as threatening and chilling. The embassy statement reads, "It has been the government and media who have been promoting anti-Russian propaganda, distorting the truth about the conflict in Ukraine, misleading people like Finbar Kafarki. Now they face the results of their own efforts. We also do not know if Mr. Martin's remarks signify support for the Irish to take part in combat in Ukraine, but we do know that if that is the case, then Ireland would be the direct participant of the conflict with all the ensuing consequences." The Netherlands has sent a war crimes investigation team to Ukraine for the third time. The 60-people-strong team, which also includes 9 Czech experts, left for Ukraine at the beginning of this week to investigate. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. In the early hours of April 28, 2023, Russia launched the first major wave of cruise missile strikes against Ukraine since early March 2023. Although Ukraine shot down most of the missiles, at least 25 civilians were killed. The attacks suggest a departure in Russia's use of long-range strikes. The wave involved fewer missiles than those over the winter and was unlikely to have been targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. There is a realistic possibility that Russia was attempting to intercept Ukrainian reserve units and military supplies recently provided to Ukraine. Russia operates an inefficient targeting process and prioritizes perceived military necessity over preventing collateral damage, including civilian death. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. Russian forces launched a series of missile strikes against rear areas of Ukraine on the night of April 27th. The Russian Ministry of Defense (MOD) confirmed the appointment of Vice Admiral Vladimir Vorobyov as the new commander of the Baltic Fleet on April 28th, following the transfer of former Baltic Fleet Commander Admiral Viktor Lina to the Pacific Fleet. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree on April 27th codifying conditions for the further large-scale deportation to Russia of residents of occupied areas of Ukraine. Russian Defense Minister Army General Sergei Shoigu promoted the Kremlin's efforts to form a potential anti-Western coalition during a meeting of the defense ministers of Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO) member states in New Delhi, India. Head of the Kremlin-controlled Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill of Moscow, defrocked the Russian Orthodox Church proto-deacon who did not support Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The main efforts of the enemy are focused on conducting offensive operations in the Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka directions. More than 40 enemy attacks were repelled. The fiercest battles continue for Bakhmut and Marinka. Our soldiers courageously hold the defense. In the Liman direction, the enemy carried out unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of Horlivka. In the Bakhmut direction, the enemy continues to conduct offensive actions. Heavy fighting continues for the city of Bakhmut. In addition, during the day, the enemy conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of the settlement of Pretechine. In the Avdiivka direction, the enemy carried out unsuccessful offensive actions in the area of Pervomaiske. In the Marinka direction, our defenders repelled numerous enemy attacks in the area of Marinka and Novomikhailivka settlements during the day. In the Marinka area, in the units of the Russian occupation forces, cases of collective refusal to participate in hostilities have become more frequent. It was established that the main factors affecting this are large losses in manpower, untimely supply of ammunition to the occupiers, the lack of a sufficient number of personnel protective equipment, and the forcing of servicemen of the Russian Federation to conduct assault operations without the support of heavy equipment and artillery. The Russian occupiers have strengthened the counterintelligence and police regime in the temporarily occupied territory of the Kerch Peninsula of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. Thus, since April 26th, the occupiers have increased the number of patrols. On local roads, they have reinforced police posts with officers of the FSB of the Russian Federation who carry out random checks of the civilian population, in particular checking mobile phones and the presence of a Russian passport. And with that, another report is finished. If you're interested in any of the articles I mentioned and want to read up on them, you can find links to them in the description as usual. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.